Hello and welcome back. And coming up next, we have Emmanuel Tissera continuing with the Australian theme that we have going on with his dates gone wrong. Can we have Emmanuel on, please?
Hey, Emmy.
Hi, Emmy.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you
It's
guys?
your good, thank you. It's your second time at Umbraco Community Day,
Oh
and it's
yes.
always a pleasure to have you. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I will. But before I do that, just want to make sure that you stay online because I need a little bit of audience participation to start this one off.
Of course.
So hopefully you guys can provide that for me. So I'm Emmanuel. I'm the technical director at Luminary, working with Umbraco since 2009. That seems a long time ago. And it's been a crazy ride. Sometimes we feel a bit forgotten over here back in Australia by Umbraco, but we've got the Umbraco cloud now in Australia, which is a big win for us over here. And we first got our first commercial project on it as well. So it's an awesome time for Umbraco in Australia, I would say.
We've seen some amazing community work from Emmanuel and his team from Australia. He's a meetup organizer himself, and we always see fantastic talks and articles from him.
You have a meetup this week, in fact, don't you?
No, unfortunately, that had to get cancelled because we've got lots of things happening. But yeah, we've got meetups going. We've actually had to reduce a bit of our meetups just because we've got new meetups going in Brisbane now. Robert Foster is involved in that, and Melbourne and Sydney. So what we do is, because most of these meetups are hybrid, that's what everybody's asking for. It doesn't seem to work when it's just only in person, so it's mostly hybrid, and we've got it happening in 3 locations, but everybody gets to attend wherever you are, and I think that's a nice way for us to go forward. So that's
I'm
working out
excited.
well for us.
I'll be back down under in Sydney in February, and I've been talking to Rob, and we're hoping to get a meetup off the ground then as well. So yeah, fingers crossed we get to see more of the community.
Yeah, that'll be great. That'll be great.
Whenever you're ready, Emmy, just let's dive right in.
Yes, and let me see now, sharing screens. It's always fun.
And we'll be here if you need any audience participation. Don't worry.
Cool. Thank you, and good evening again from Melbourne. So thank you for attending this session where we are going to talk about dates gone wrong. Now, it's strictly not only Umbraco, it's a little bit wider than that, but let's see where we get to it. So just to make sure that all of us are on the same page, I will not be talking about going out for a romantic dinner with your significant other and that date going completely wrong. I will talk about a slightly less tricky subject. We're going to be talking about dates and times. So I only got 2 volunteers here. Maybe those on the stream as well could start putting in some comments there. That's fine. I may not be able to read it, but I'll get Purnima and Kalam to volunteer for me. So what's the date you can see here, Purnima? What's the day, month, and year? I lost him. Technical glitch, but that's fine, right? There could be multiple interpretations of this particular date, right? Usually I get the audience to tell me what these dates are. And let me take you through a few answers I usually get.
Sorry, Emmy, we were having a technical challenge there, but I think we can hear you now and you can hear us.
Oh, did you lose me?
No,
No.
it was our fault. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, technical fault, unmuting. That's fine. So some people would say this is the 2nd of December 2007, right? So Australia, the Netherlands, UK, and most countries, including Indonesia, and I'll tell you why, use the format of day, month, and year. Then others would say this is the 12th of February 2007. Now, if you were in the US, that's correct. The date format is month, day, and year in the US. And if somebody else might have said 7th December 2002. So countries like China, Korea, and Iran use the date format year, month, day. That wasn't too tricky, was it? As you've been introduced, I'm Emmanuel. I'm working at Luminary and been in software development for over 20 years now. My first program was an alarm clock I wrote on an IBM 386 in 1997. So you'll need to forgive my fascination with dates and times. You'll also hear references to Bali and Indonesia in this presentation. And that's because we've got an awesome office in Bali, Indonesia, and a great team over there. So some of my examples are based on that time zone. A quick look at what we'll be going through today. I promise we'll finish in half an hour or even earlier. We will delve a little deeper into the challenges with dates and times. Then we will look at some common issues software developers and their audience face, some strategies to fix those issues. Then I will speak on the legal and psychological implications of dates and times. We will end with some best practice examples, tools and resources, and some tips and tricks. Now, as we saw earlier, and you must have realized now, dates and times can be tricky. So our challenge is to design and develop our software for a global and regional audience. What does this mean? Let's have a look. We will first look at some common issues or pitfalls with dates and times. Look at the statement on this screen. It says, Umbraco Community Day starts at 7 p.m. today. Do you see any problem with it? What have I written incorrectly here? Now, this statement is true to me and to the rest, not everybody, maybe not even Nathan, but few people who are in Melbourne and Sydney, that's true for them. But for Nathan and our teammates in Bali, it's a big fat lie. So the challenge is that people in different countries interpret dates differently, like we saw with our first example of 2nd December 2007. Or you need to deal with time zones like Jakarta, Bali, Brisbane, where Nathan is from, and Melbourne. 7 p.m. here is 4 p.m. in Bali, or 6 p.m. in Brisbane. Then you need to deal with DST, or Daylight Savings Time. 7 p.m. Melbourne time on the 1st of July is 5 p.m. Bali time. 7 p.m. Melbourne time on the 1st of July is 7 p.m. in Brisbane as well, because at that point, there is no DST involved. Finally, as developers, we need to develop for a global or regional audience. In Indonesia, you have 3 time zones, and in Australia, we have 3 primary time zones during winter and 4 in summer. Not paying attention to either of these could lead us to trouble. Let's have a look. While working at Emirates, our flight status module didn't pick up the correct date for the DST changeover for Romania. Passengers arrived 1 hour earlier than expected to the airport. if by some chance this was 1 hour later, heads would have rolled since the flight may have been delayed or cancelled, causing millions of dollars in lost revenue. So dates and times can have severe consequences, and we will talk about this in detail later on. What are the strategies we can use to overcome any negative consequences when dealing with dates and times? Our first strategy would be to use an international standard such as ISO 8601. This standard was first introduced in 1988 and was last amended around a year ago. So, no pun intended, it is very current and up to date. It makes dates and times clear and unambiguous. It reduces confusion and lets machines read the date and time without any issues. Next, I'm going to break down for you visually how the ISO standard is written in each of its parts. You see, I'm going to start with year, then month, then day or date. So if we look at today's date written in ISO 8601, the date format will consist of year, month, date, or day. If you, it will have a time separator using the English letter T. Then the time will be denoted in hours, minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. It will also have a time zone associated with it. UTC time is represented by a Z. For example, we will represent 7:52 p.m. today in this manner. You can see UTC plus 11 as a time zone. The second strategy we will use is relative time. Rather than saying wine o'clock started at 7:30 p.m., we could say it started 30 minutes ago. This is a very natural way for humans to interpret time, and it also reduces cognitive overload. Another strategy is to provide the time zone information. Here we have used UTC plus 11, and that makes it clear to anyone reading this statement. Umbraco Community Day starts at 7 p.m. UTC plus 11 on Wednesday, 13th December. This is also a legally acceptable statement. But if we know our audience is in Bali and Melbourne, we can do a bit more to support them. We can say Umbraco Community Day starts at 7 p.m. Melbourne time or 4 p.m. Bali time on Wednesday, 13th December. Let's look at date and time from a legal perspective. Legal contracts include specific dates and times for delivery of goods or the completion of a project. If there are any misinterpretations around these dates and times, it can lead to conflict and errors, which can lead to civil disputes in a court of law. In some legal cases, there are time limits which certain actions should be taken, such as filing a lawsuit or submitting a claim. If these deadlines are missed due to confusion or errors around dates and times, the plaintiff, the person who files the complaint against another person, may miss their chance of compensation or remedies. For example, my workplace, Luminary, may offer a 3-month bug fix for a period. So you need to take use of it during that period. The timing of events or actions can be critical to the outcome, especially in courts. For example, video or audio recordings may need to be timestamped to establish the sequence of events or to prove that something occurred at a particular time. An example where this would be useful is if someone's motorbike got scratched when it's outside our office. When dealing with international or across different countries, legal matters across different countries, time zone differences can cause confusion and errors. For example, a deadline that is 5 p.m. in Melbourne will be 2 p.m. in Bali, leading to missed deadlines or legal issues. For example, Luminary might have a project due at 9 a.m. Melbourne time, which is 6 a.m. Bali time, which means some of my colleagues in Bali are going to lose some beauty sleep. Documents need to be dated and time-stamped to establish their authenticity and validity. This is especially true in legal contexts such as contracts or agreements, where the date and time of signing is critical. That was the legal implications of date and time. Now I will speak about the psychological impact. Dealing with dates and times can add to our cognitive load, which is the amount of mental effort required to complete a task. When we have to constantly convert between time zones or figure out the correct date format, it can be mentally exhausting and lead to decision fatigue. For example, having to organize a family call can be tiring for me, as I've got family in Melbourne, Sri Lanka, Bali, and Dubai. Deadlines and time-sensitive tasks can create a sense of time pressure, which can lead to stress and anxiety. This can be especially true in contexts such as academic or professional deadlines, where there are consequences for missing a deadline. Like when I have 3 projects due on the same date, but I'm not really started on that. Planning and scheduling activities require dates and times, which can create a sense of order and routine. This may work for some people like me. However, this can also lead to rigidity and inflexibility, as people may rather go with the flow and feel the freedom to stop and start as they please. In the end, everyone's brains are different, and so are their behaviors. Remembering dates and times can be difficult, especially if there are many important dates to keep track of. Assignments, tests, meetings, project deadlines, birthdays, wedding anniversaries. This can lead to stress and anxiety, as people may worry about forgetting an important date or a task. Our perception of time can be influenced by a variety of factors, including our mood, activity level, and environment. Dates and times can also affect our perception of time, as we may perceive time as moving more quickly or slowly, depending on the context. For example, when I was on holiday in Bali in April for 2 weeks, those 2 weeks went by in a blur. On the other hand, it seems that when I'm in a boring meeting on a Friday evening, time seems to slow down, which I'm sure all of you can relate to. We have now spoken about common issues, strategies, legal and psychological implications. Let's jump into some best practice examples. We know that different software approach dates and times differently. Usually at this point, I will ask the audience to give me some examples, but I'm going to skip that one here. We'll jump into a few which I have seen. So I like the fact that Windows, Android, Google, and Microsoft Live default to the time zone your network is on. Then those systems also allow you to further customize your date time format settings. If you have flown recently, you would also remember that airlines always mention departure and arrival times in the local time. So you don't need to make any calculations and are less likely to arrive after the flight has left. But the times are in 24-hour format, and that might cause an issue to some people. Slack shows relative time. As we discussed earlier, this just makes it easier for us to comprehend time and communicate in a timely manner. Another good example of best practice dates and times is from a web application I was involved in developing for Clipsal by Schneider Electric. We use .NET 6 in the backend and React in the front end. They work hand in hand to bring a good date time experience to the audience. This is a detailed screen of a project, which was created a few hours before I grabbed this screenshot. The date time design here is very clear. It speaks in both relative and absolute times. Last modified by Abraham 14 minutes ago at 15:34. So there's no room for confusion. The listing screen shows the last modified and created times in relative time here. This makes it easier for users to quickly scan through the listing. This application also outputs PDF files, which are either printed on paper or distributed electronically. In these PDF files, the time zone is mentioned in a very simplistic manner, which is legally compliant. Now coming to Umbraco. How does Umbraco deal with date and time conversions? Pretty good, I would say. Here's me looking at the publishing history from Melbourne and from a computer in Bali. The published time is given in local time. 11:45 a.m. Melbourne time is 8:45 a.m. Bali time. Similarly, with Umbraco forms, you can see the same behavior. Let's see how it works in the back end. Data supplied to the browser comes in the local time. The time zone here is a bit wonky, not strictly ISO 8601, but it works. This is done by sending a local time offset in minutes to the server. So for example, for Melbourne, the request payload sends minus 660 minutes, and for Bali, the request payload sends minus 480 minutes as the local time offset. So then the server reads that and replies back to me in the response payload with a time which is local to my location and which takes into account this local time offset. Another great site, the Umbraco Community Day website. That's pretty awesome too. It shows time in the local time zone. 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. for Melbourne. That's how long the Umbraco Community Day is running. Or 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. in Bali. There's also this nifty time zone selector if you need to see the session times in a different time zone. Those are some good examples. Here are some tools and resources which I have used to help with dates, times, and conversions. Timeanddate.com is my go-to when it comes to organizing meetings internationally. Maybe I could use this to organize family catch-ups, and that would reduce the cognitive load on me. Google Calendar also has a great feature like displaying a secondary time zone and clocks from multiple time zones. You can find them in the Google Calendar settings. Now for the developers, here is some code. Humanizer is a .NET project which helps with manipulating and displaying dates, times, and time spans. Also note that there's a TypeScript port of Humanizer. For example, you can see Humanizer converting various times to relative times. The first two lines convert tomorrow and 2 hours ago. You can also convert to different cultures like Japanese and Spanish, as you see in the last two lines of code. There's a URL for the Humanizer project, and you can find it on GitHub. One more for the developers, you can use native browser functionality to change dates and times to a local format in 3 lines of JavaScript. Here are some tips and tricks which we use at Luminary that could be useful to you. When you're saving dates and times, always store them as UTC in ISO 8601 format. You should include the time zone information where it is appropriate. Also use the correct data type and don't try to create your own weird data type. When you don't know your audience or their location, always transmit data in UTC time. This can then be translated to local time on the browser. I showed you a code snippet for it earlier. It would be ideal to use a framework such as Humanizer or a different JavaScript framework to do the conversions. Make sure that you can debug and test these conversions. If you take one thing away, always remember your audience. Remember, everyone interprets dates and times differently. Thank you for listening to me. Not sure that we have a mechanism to get any questions, but if not, you can catch me on Twitter.
Thanks, Emmy. I can certainly say that the dates have gone really well. One sentence that really caught my line from your slides was develop for a global audience. That's very, very important. And personally speaking, that's up there with accessibility.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. So from obviously, Emmy just spent a few weeks down in Australia, and I've been working with my team in the UK and also dealing with community members who are on other time zones as well. And it has really exemplified just how actually complicated it can be. And as Bonima says, it's almost an accessibility thing. You don't want to be sending someone a message in the middle of their night and vice versa, or expecting things from people in those weird time zones. Even ironically, just as you were doing your talk, I was trying to work out why my Google Calendar was showing a weird notification. It turns out it was still stuck on the Australian time zone and hadn't updated yet. And so, yeah, like I was going, why is Ronald scheduled a meeting for next week at 9 p.m.? I'm like, oh, okay. It still thinks it's Australia. So yeah, it's a really eye-opening talk. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for the wonderful session. Do we have any questions? Should we just check? No, there's been good audience interaction for all the questions you posted, just general chat. So if you have time, do go and say hi to the chat that's happening on YouTube. But fantastic session. And I actually thanked your session yesterday because I was sending out all the session invites. Sitting in the UK for an event happening in CET for, speakers around the world. I thanked Emmy.
So yeah, time zones are hard. We had the pleasure of having John Skeet at Umbraco Spark a couple of years back, and he did a talk about his Noda time library and how that time zones are really difficult and different calendar systems and all kinds of other things as well. Yeah. I got an API error the other day that said this date is not a valid Gregorian date. It's like, but it is, but it was in the wrong format because
There's more things coming up in, no, not coming up. There's more things with .NET 8 around date, isn't it? iDate time provider? Is that an interface? Something like on the lines of that. Yeah. So.
Exciting space, exciting topic. Something that's probably never going to end, but yeah.
There's always a date.
But one good thing is Umbraco has done very well in that space. I won't mention the name of a particular CMS, which is very, very expensive. Doesn't do dates and times so well.
We can take a guess.
And it's I was amazed because I like really went in to see how Umbraco was doing it and just looked under the hood a little bit, and it was amazing to see how well it's been done. And for users, like even here in like, for example, Nathan is in Brisbane, he's 1 hour behind me. And when I was having conversations with people in Brisbane, you'd sometimes miss the fact that you're just 1 hour apart because half of the year we are on the same time zone and the next you're not. So interesting interesting times.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Thank you so much, Emmy. We'll see you soon.
Have a good rest of your day.
Cool. Thank you. See ya. Bye.
Okay, we'll be back in a short second with a really exciting panel, building your personal brand. Don't go anywhere.